Welcome to another episode of Game Changers for Government Contractors. Today, we have a special guest on here, Mr. Tom Prokop, and we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic today of how to start up a government contracting business with a contract in hand. I don't think we've ever talked about this as the topic for an episode, so it's going to be interesting as we get into this. But before we get in, Tom, why don't you take a moment to kind of introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I know you work with us, and we want to make sure that's out in the clear as well. So over to you.
Awesome, Mike. Well, hey, it is great to be on the show. It's been a long time listener here. Actually, I been a government contracting for over 15 years now. Started out working for a couple small 8A companies, and then ended up launching my own firm in 2014. Grew it organically in areas of process reengineering, program project management, cybersecurity. Ended up acquiring a company as well. Through that process, ended up becoming a client of RSM Federal, and heard the podcast a number of years ago and signed up and was one of the executive coaching clients and worked with Josh Frank on a regular basis. And so have learned a lot through you guys from the years. Through my process, I ended up exiting at the end of 22. Part of it kind of tied to family reasons. My mother was sick and unfortunately passed away right after my exit. After that in January of 23 was kind of looking for my why, right, of what's next. And that's how Kraken Federal came about. A couple of folks had heard that I had exited, and one of my contacts had a company that was a $30 million IT services company that was in trouble. They were losing money on federal contracts. About 5 to 10% of their business was tied to federal. They were one of those companies that was rare and got very lucky in copying and pasting requirements and won those, and then didn't know what to do to service them and found themselves in trouble. That was a very interesting opportunity to get my hands back into it and turn them around. Great opportunity of kind of going through a restructure and a reset. And, we were able to help them win their first bid within 5 months, second win in month 7, and also help them win a key recompete. Going through that, we worked with a couple other companies that year in 23 and reconnected with you and Josh, and started to talk about what partnering would look like. And that's how I ended up becoming one of your certified federal coaches as well, and working down that path. And I'll say it's a great fit, because what we found was that when we were working with a lot of our first-time clients we've never heard of before in our first year, they would always bring us in for bid and proposal, and we'd always, we'd accept that, but we'd always end up finding ourselves working backwards to fix other things, right?
Yeah.
And coming in through what I went through with the RSM framework, I call it, right, is kind of going through that reset where you reset from the beginning and then move forward. And so when we work with clients now, we bring them through this RSM framework, as I call it, starting with the value mapping, the strategy reset. And it really lines up a nice process that then prepares them for, at that point in time when they want to move into proposals or government certifications or other things, that they're better suited for that rather than having to work backwards and fix other things.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I know it doesn't seem like a really sexy place to start for a lot of folks, because a lot of people just want to jump in and start responding to things and increase how many proposals they're doing every month. And it's frustrating on this end to see that sometimes, because there are companies that will do that. There are companies that'll help you respond to more stuff. But if you're responding poorly, now you're just responding to twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times as much stuff poorly.
Right.
You're not really, getting better at what you do, and you are just playing the numbers game. But it's exhausting playing the numbers game, and it's very expensive. Even if you don't hire externally, it's expensive internally to have all your resources doing that, and then you're still losing, but now you're losing 4 or 5 times as much. And now the overall quality of the team is starting to degrade, the mindset of the team. It's really difficult to maintain high levels of positive energy when you're getting kicked in the gut all the time. And
Right.
so to do that reset that you're talking about is so key. And I think it's really important. I'm glad you're able to do that working with us and our team. And you've quickly risen in the ranks, as one of our top coaches in the team as well. So we really appreciate working with you and all your insights. And I think you're one of the few coaches that have worked in big businesses as well, not just in the small arena. So you've got the You've got all of that past experience in big corporate America and little corporate America and a little bit everything in between, which kind of led us to the topic that we were talking about today of starting a business with a contract in hand, because you have a process that you have used with folks to do that. And let's start off with kind of what triggered us wanting to talk about this, because you were telling me a story about being at the vets conference and how that kind of was what kind of generated this topic. So let's start there.
Right. So last May we were at the Vets conference down in Orlando, and look, hey, with my prior GovCon, we were just a small business. We had no socioeconomic set aside, so we never really attended these conferences before, right? So this was my first time attending Vets. I was there, working with RSM, and as we were meeting with folks that were coming by the booth, and we were having conversations with them. A lot of these are entrepreneurial folks in government that are looking to start up that haven't launched, but there was many of them that we met that had launched, and they're 12 months into this and there's no traction. And they're like, hey, I keep calling, a name of a large, right? Not to call anybody out, but a specific large name, right? And giving multiple names. And hey, I'm not getting any traction. I'm a small, why won't they talk to me? I'm an 8A, I'm an SDVOSB, why aren't they, and so much focus on their socioeconomic, or just that they're trying to reach out. And it's like, look, if you don't have a bag of money and a contract lined up, these guys are going to call you, right? Like, you need to solve a problem. And like, I started to see these lights turn on their faces, because here I'm hearing folks where they've spent their 401k, right? And they're coming towards the end of the light here. And I'm feeling bad for them. And it's like, you're going about this in a completely wrong way. You've gotten bad advice on this. Go out and be useful and solve somebody's problem. And that's what really triggered this. And I started walking folks. I found myself having one-on-one meetings right there on the floor, walking folks through how I started up my company with a contract in hand. And you could just see life come back into them, like, oh my God, I can do that? I didn't know that was possible, right? And so that's how we came up with this topic. And really, it's simple, but it's somewhat mind-blowing for folks. And that is, when I started up my company, right? My wife and I, we had our first child at the time. We have 4 now, right? And my wife was like, hey, when you do a startup, like, have something in hand, right? Like, let's mitigate the risk here, right? Let's have something in hand to get going, right? So, I had a non-compete. Before I launched my company, I was with a company called Global Tech, built out a very nice program up in the CMS Innovation Center, but I had a non-compete, right? And so honored that non-compete, and I looked elsewhere, right? So what I did was I hit the job boards, right? I hit Dice, I hit Indeed. And this was before the days of where you could really designate 1099 or corp to corp or remote work or anything like that, right? So pretty much folks were bringing me in, looking at really hiring me as a W-2. But what I did was I was prepared. I knew I wanted to start up my own company, right? So I did all that pre-work ahead of time. I had my company name. I had it registered. I had my EIN. I had it registered within the state of Maryland where we were headquartered at, right? I had all my paperwork and business insurance and everything all ready to go. And then I started reaching out. And what I do is I would open up these doors. I would come in for the interview and start to work it into a manner in which, okay, hey, this is a great fit for my background. Here's the business case on why we should go corp to corp instead, right? Now, not everybody bid off on that, right? Obviously, sometimes, hey, they have certain subcontracting standards. They couldn't do that, right? But on one particular company that had a contract at NOAA, they gave me that opportunity. And it was quite interesting because really they wanted to bring me on as a W-2 because of my health IT experience. They says, hey, Tom, you've been at Program Support Center under HHS and done business transformation work. You've done business transformation work at FDA CEDAR, and you've done it at CMS. We are a woman-owned SDVOSB company, and we want to get into CMS. And I'm like, hey, that's great, and I'm all here to support you, but you're almost large, and you're not 8A. Like, you're not going to have a shot at CMS, right? Like, I've been there for the past 2 years. Like, I know, right? And so what I'd like to offer up is give me the opportunity to go corp to corp with you, right? So now I'm offering up something. Give me the opportunity to go corp to corp with you and let me knock this out of the park. And in return, anytime you want to talk about health IT, any of those pursuits, not only will I give you my available time, like no charge, right? I will bring in my team, folks I've worked with, other experts I know, to help you out in any of those pursuits. They're like, hey, that's a deal, let's do it. And they never even called me on it. I mean, it was a great opportunity, right? Because they eventually figured out that, hey, this wasn't going to be a place for them to play in, right? But it gave me an opportunity to get my start, right? And then from that point on, right, it was have the client love me and see what else I could do to help out, right? And start building from that point. And so, starting, hey, February of 2014, I was able to start, from that moment with a contract in hand. And it was a 4-month contract, right? Providing strategic support to the CIO of NOAA, right? And from there, I got to build into other areas of NOAA. And, hey, you time or you invoice timely, right? You have your client love you. You get great feedback. You're a team player with the rest of the team, right? And then you start to find other areas of opportunity, right? Intel that you can provide your product. Become invaluable, become useful, right? In that first year, I grew from one person on that contract to having 7 people on that contract, right? On various task orders, right? And like this contract was already awarded, right? This was all post-award work, right? So folks say, oh, hey, you need to do the pre-acquisition and get on a team. No, it's about, there is a path. There is a path that, other than the normalized path, right? For folks to be able to go and start up a company like that. And, there's a lot of value to that. There's a lot of value to primes in that, right? Because it's bringing in new blood. With me, it was bringing in somebody that, with myself, that had a commercial past experience too, right? Because they were looking at doing some strategic change management, right? And a new division within NOAA and kind of, hey, how does that service delivery look? How does the process look within that? Well, here I come from, like you said, hey, Fortune 50 companies, right? Home Depot, Internal Audit Leadership Development Program. KPMG, where I worked at Philip Morris and GMAC and Fifth Third Bank and a number of other financial institutions. Omnicare, largest institutional pharmacy around. Duke Energy, right? So a lot of big names, big corporations that have processes and procedures, and just kind of how that all rolls out very much fitted into the government and trying to evolve and transform it.
Well, that's a great story. And I love that. A lot of times we get on here and people are able to share experience, or they're able to share anecdotally how this worked, because they're like, hey, I've done it with other clients, but you walking through it is just very, very different. And I think for a lot of folks, there's 2 separate things here. One is the average person that starts a GovCon business with a contract in hand is because somebody walked up to them and said, hey, you're really good at doing ABC. If you went out on your own, we'd give this to you. Mm-hmm. Right. And then they start that, and then they never win another contract, right? They can't figure out how to do it. But yours is a very different approach, where you looked at it and said, I'm going to create an opportunity here by going in and talking to folks. I think the average person would have a difficult time having the mindset that you just described of, I'm going to go in and have the guts to ask for this from them. Can you talk about how it may not have been easy, and it may have been more than one company that you approached? Can you talk about a little bit about the mindset that it takes to be able to confidently walk up to another company and say, I know you're recruiting for an employee, but I don't want to do that. I want to do corp to corp, like you're talking here, business to business, where I can work with you basically as a sub on your contract that's existing that you already won, without me being on the prior team and all that kind of stuff. Like there's something about the mindset piece there. And you have a different mind. I mean, I've known you long enough to know you have a very different mindset than the average person here, but talk about that a little bit.
So, I'll take it back to my roots, right? So I was born in Western Pennsylvania, right? Outside of Pittsburgh.
Can't hold that against you, but okay.
We're grinders, right? Like Steel City, right? We grind it out, right? When I graduated from college, I was the first graduating class after 9/11, right? Leading up through my entire undergraduate, right? I was lining up to do investment banking, right? I had Series 6, 63 licenses, finished up with a PNC Capital Markets internship, doing investment banking and credit risk, and 9/11 happens, right? And everything that you were looking to pursue is all gone, right? A complete change of, okay, what's next? Where do I go with my career? And that's how I ended up, with Home Depot and their Internal Audit Leadership Development Program. After, 300 some applications, right, for various jobs throughout the country, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a mindset. It's that grinder mindset of just I don't accept no. And look, I'm a third generation entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My mother was an entrepreneur. So that's in the blood, right? But it's just something that I had a desire of starting up my own business one day, and I wasn't going to accept no as an answer, right? And it's being able then to be flexible, to be able to change with the tides, to be able to get it so that what your end goal is, right? So I'm not here to say that I am the greatest at XYZ to be able to convince them to get that subcontract. I'm here to understand what their need is, right? And you're right, it wasn't the first interview, right? It was a number of companies that I had discussed this with, but it happened to be that one that had that particular need, and really digging into the requirements of the job, what they really needed, meeting with them, and letting them do the talking. As I went in, it was almost I was doing the interview of them and getting them to really talk about it, and then I adjusted my sales pitch in those meetings to basically win them over to get them to go down that route, right? And yeah, like I said, it wasn't the first one. This was a couple times going through this to be able to get to the point to be able to finesse that, right? Yeah. But if look, this is a cutthroat market. It is a very hard market, and if you want to be able to launch a company in this, I mean, you got to be all in, right? And that was my mindset from day one. And it's like, hey, look, when I first got in the market, folks told me I couldn't get into government contracting, right? And this is kind of back to my days when I first broke in, 2010, right? I was at Freddie Mac, and I was in the business transformation office, and I was networking with new to the area, right? My wife and I decided, hey, let's move here from Chicago so we can start up a family, be close to family. She grew up in the DC area. I grew up in Pittsburgh. And I started networking, and I'm hearing about this government contracting. I'm like, what the heck is that, right? Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, hey, it's like this consulting that you can do, and you don't have to travel, and it's here in the DC area, and you just have to deal with traffic. It's like, hey, that sounds fantastic because I love that type of consulting. And then it was like, oh, wait, no, you're from commercial. You can't really do this, right? The government is different, right? Well, it ended up being a unique opportunity with Program Support Center under HHS that needed business transformation work done. And that they specifically said, we need somebody with commercial to come in here and fix these processes, right? And that's what finally gave me my foot in the door. Then from there, once I started to understand some, I'm like, guys, you're not really that different, right? Mm-hmm. And when we talk about business processes, don't tell me what your system does, because that's not really a business process. And then being able to start to break it down, then they started to have these aha moments. They're like, oh, wait a minute, people from commercial can figure this out, right? Yeah. And really apply it at a different rate. And that's how I was able to kind of build my successes. And it's like, okay, hey, wait a minute, I can do this on my own. I built up the confidence to that. And then I'm now ready to go and launch into a company.
Yeah. We always talk about the art and science of government sales. What you describe really is those two coming together. There is an art and a science piece. Like you talked about adjusting your sales pitch on the fly and talking to multiple people. And I think a lot of people have the art or the science, but it's when the two are combined that the magic happens. It's one thing to understand the process, but then how do you finesse the process? Because you can use the process too strict and fail every time. Like you could have gone in there and said, well, I'm here to get a job and I'm here to do this. And you could have just failed every single time, but you understood, well, this is how I'm going to adjust my pitch on the fly in order to get what I really, truly want out of this opportunity. And to me, I think the greatest winners always create opportunities for themselves. Right. They're constantly creating opportunities. And that's exactly what you're describing here. So as people are hearing the story, they may or may not have captured the process. So can you walk us through what the process itself looks like for starting a contract in hand? Because again, I think some people may not connect the dots in your story. I feel like I did, but I want to make sure other people can connect the dots and say, okay, here's the process if I'm just starting this up, or if I've been banging my head against the wall for the last 6, 8, 10, 12 months, here's how I can go about getting that contract very quickly.
Right. So if you're looking at just from the starting out phase, right? First off, have all your startup material set, right? So have your company name, your website, have all that, be ready to go as if you're a professional there ready to close the deal, right? Don't come in. Oh, hey, wait a minute. I want to pitch this corp to corp, and then, but hey, I'm going to need a couple of days here to get all my affairs in order.
Right.
Like no, you're a joke,
right?
So have those pieces in order, right? And like I said, business name, be registered in your state, EIN, business insurance, website, professional. Don't come in with a Gmail, right? Like have your professional email.
No
right?
Gmail, no Yahoo, no Rocket Mail. No, I saw somebody the other day with an AOL.
It's so easy. It's almost you come across as lazy then, right? So have those pieces. So let's just assume that's all done, right? So next piece is looking, understand what is your value, what is your benefit. So let's do taking a look at RSF. Value map yourself, right? Do a value map of what the value and benefit you have done in your career, right? And let's identify those and let's really call those out, right? And let's start looking at specific opportunities in your region, whether, hey, you need to be remote or if you can be on site. On site's going to be better and give you a better opportunity to grow. I know everybody has this preference for the remote side of the house, but it's a great disadvantage to start something like this remote. My biggest advantage in scaling that first year to 7 people was being on site, providing intel to the prime, meeting with the head executives, right? Building that relationship to then get that first opportunity, right? So try to target on-site opportunities, right? From there, use your job boards, whittle it down. So maybe you're a project manager, a business analyst, maybe you're DoD focused, maybe you're civilian focused. Start to hone in your focus. Don't pick stuff that's stretched for you. Focus where you're going to have that value and benefit, where you can differentiate yourself, where you can sell that good story, right? Make them feel like they're getting more out of it than you are, right? I mean, think about it. Like anytime we come into, hey, whether it's teaming or any other type of deal, don't you feel better? Aren't you more willing to do it if you feel like you're getting more out of it? Don't stretch for that extra couple dollars in rate. Your goal was to build a company, right? Yeah. If you know that, hey, I could survive on X, right? Don't go and try to push it $15 an hour more, right? I mean, hey, would that be nice? Sure. But close the deal, right? Stretch as much as you can, close the deal and move on because that's your goal, right? Understand your goal and that is your end goal. If you don't get 100% of everything you want to do within that, some folks get so caught up on, well, it's not what I really wanted to do. Well, was your goal to start up the company or is your goal to do what you love, right? Your goal is to start up the company. I mean, hey, we all got to sacrifice, right? Yeah. You all have to start out somewhere, right? I mean, hey, one of my first jobs when I was a teenager was doing landscaping work, right? And it was a neighbor across the street that had a nursery, right? And it's like, hey, when we're out there 105, 110 degrees, like this is why you go to school. So you don't have to work out in these types of conditions, right? So it's kind of the same thing here, right? So if my end goal is to go and to start up a company, right? I'm going to do whatever it takes. Like I'll go do janitorial stuff. I don't care. As long as I can have some sort of rate being paid that I could use to then fund the business, I will go and do that, right? And I'll figure a way to make that happen, right? You have an easier sell when it's something that you're good at, right? Hence the value and benefit, value mapping your own resume and career, right? So from going from there, right, then, hey, you start the application process. Now, like I said, it's a little bit different than it was in 2014, right? So now these days you have the ability to say, hey, I want to do corp to corp. I want to do 1099. So you have an opportunity to kind of look for those. But as you start to look through those, right, identify government contracting firms, right? Take a look at the Inc. 5000, take a look at best places to work, take a look at, LinkedIn, right? There's GovCons everywhere, right? Start to identify government contractor names, right? And start to narrow down your list, right? Because obviously there's commercial companies everywhere too, right? So narrow down your list to companies that are government contractors and, start to work your application process from there, right? Now, folks will say, and this is feedback I've gotten, hey, Tom, I've tried this, right? And unfortunately, I have not gotten any results yet. And the first thing I say to them is I say, hey, let me see your resume. And I read their resume and it reads like this, like world-class innovator, right? This amazing proposal writer, all BD. I'm going to get you 100 million in sales. I mean, it is just like the next Steve Jobs, right? Yeah. And it's like, you're screaming you're going to compete against them. Like, is your goal to start up a business or is your goal to compete against them and make them feel like if they bring you on board, you're going to take their contract? Like, that's so cool. I want to start up my company. It's like, all right, well, here's the thing. You enjoy delivery work. You're not there to grow, right? You're there to partner, right? You're there to be a value add. Once again, put more into the basket than you're going to take out. That's one of my best tips of advice with this is to, be useful, solve a problem, right? And look at this at how you can put more into the basket for them, right? So come at this as, hey, if it's a project manager position, right? Don't talk about BD. Don't talk about all the sales that you've done in the past, right? Talk about how you do project management better than anybody else, right? Throw in metrics, right? Because if you look back, if you're a good project manager, you're going to keep stats at some point, right? So talk about your stats. Talk about how you've managed these things. Talk about how many people you've run, your CPAR ratings of the contracts that you run. Use all that as build up. That's your differentiators, right? Use that to get ahead. Don't talk about sales, right? So tailor it to each job, right? So you're going to have different resumes for this, but the key point with your resume is to not make it appear like you're going to eventually compete against them. That's not your goal. And I'd never want to compete with that company that gave me that opportunity to start up. I'd always want to look back and say, hey, you gave me the opportunity, for that startup. And actually, I'll give a quick tidbit on that too, because I recently connected with the guy that gave me that opportunity. But when you have that opportunity, right, like you treat like that's your golden egg, right? You always come back to that, and you always water that, and you always see what you can do to help out, right? And that's how you treat that company, those people that gave you that opportunity to start up. Fast forward, I'll share that I was recently brought in by a partner that said, hey, Tom, we're talking about an opportunity. And they mentioned the person's name. And I was like, that's the guy that gave me the opportunity to start out my company. I was like, can I be included on that call? And it's been years because, hey, people move on and whatnot. And so I got to be on the team's call. It was a great reconnection. It was like, hey, man, anything I can do to help out, right? It's like, hey, I appreciate, like, you've given me so much opportunity with giving me the opportunity to launch my company, the opportunity to grow that first year and everything else I was able to grow and accomplish. Thank you so much. If there's anything I can ever do or be of assistance, just let me know. And like that's how you need to treat those relationships to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I mean, there's a ton of a great advice in that whole thing. So I want to close up by talking about your final words of advice for people in that are trying to do this exact same thing. But before I do, you mentioned that your family being all in entrepreneurs, you being a third generation. What are some of the lessons that you learned from your mom or someone else who was an entrepreneur that you think people need to know about? Because I know there's some lessons in there. You don't become as determined and focused as you are or have the mentality that you do without watching that unfold. So what are some of the key lessons you learned from the other family members that were entrepreneurs?
Raise your kids in the business, right? So my mom, she owned a beauty school, right? And so we're in the Steel Mill area, Pittsburgh, right? So folks vocational schools, right? So they would come there and they would learn how to do hair, beauticians and barbers and all that. And they had grants in order to do that. And then in the afternoons, guys from the Steel Mill would come and get their haircut at a discount so that they could get their hours, so that they could get their licenses and then go off into their own shops, right? So I grew up in it, right? So hey, after school, I'd go out to my mom's business on the weekends, right? Mopping floors, like mom made us part of the business, right? And it was, something always needed to be done on the business on the weekends. She also had an apartment building tied into that building. So it's like, hey, if a tenant moved out, my dad needed to go repaint it or something like that. Like, was like, hey, I'm gonna go with dad now. We're gonna go paint a room, an apartment, right? And so it's enjoying work, right? Because in seeing that progress and seeing the growth. And so that was something I go back and I do with my kids now, right? So I have them help me at the office, or back when I had my GovCon, I'd bring them into the office, right? And it's just making that a part of it so they could see what you're spending your time on, so they can appreciate it. But I also feel like a lot of my work ethic was tied to that, mopping floors as a 10-year-old, right? In my mom's beauty school. So I think there's just a lot of lessons of just being around it. You may not, it's hard for me to kind of tie to it, maybe a specific lesson, but just kind of understanding the work and just seeing how at an early age, how people interact, right? And going back to the relationship side, right? Seeing how relationships evolve, seeing how people interact and talk to, right? Versus, maybe just watching it on a screen, right? So just kind of having that real life exposure to it from an early age.
Yeah, I love that. And I really wish I would have brought my kids in to my business early. There's other things I did where they tagged along in stuff, but like in the business is one of those things where I really wish I'd have brought them on now, because now they just don't care. They're just at an age where they're like, we don't really care what it is you do. They're all in their 20s and stuff, and it's just it's they don't care how the sausage is made. They just want the sausage, that comes with it. So it's kind of funny, but it's really good advice there for people. Let their kids be raised in the business. So for folks that are listening about this, I know you've kind of given a bunch of tips, but just final words on the advice you have for people that are going down this path. If there's just one or two parting things that you want to share.
So number one, you got to be relentless, be persistent, right? Don't give up. Look, throughout many points in my career, right, had various barriers, headways, stumbling blocks, right, lessons learned, right. You just got to keep pushing through it, right. All that ends up doing is building up scar tissue, right. And one of the best bits of advice I ever received as a college student was from a mentor of mine at my college who happened to be the head of human capital for a venture capital firm. And he says, Tom, when we're identifying executives to come in and run our investments, right, the millions of dollars we're putting into these things, we're not looking for somebody that's 100% successful, right? We want somebody that has scar tissue, right? And scar tissue is when you stumble and you learn from that. Because when you put a person that's only been successful in a situation that might then have some sort of issue, panicking only causes bad decisions, right? So you need somebody that's going to be able to, they have been there, they have done that, they know to handle that, and they can handle it in a way that is, even, right, steady, right? Yeah. Be relentless, accept your scar tissue, use that as a value add. That's another differentiator, right? But hey, this is a hard market. You can't stop. You got to keep pushing forward. Don't come across as a competitor on day one, right? Be there. Treat that company that gives you the opportunity as a golden egg, and always come back to them. Give them the opportunity to grow with you. Those are relationships for life, right? And then really just work on that resume. Use the value mapping. Reach out, look at federal access, look at the value mapping exercises. That's a great opportunity to really take that in and do. And actually, we've even added with clients kind of an employee mapping, right, to kind of really pull out the value of your employees. Kind of just doing that really pulls out the additional education, experience, speaking engagements. It brings out that subject matter expertise that could really elevate you and separate you, right? I think kind of tackling those gives you a great opportunity to kind of start down that path, right? And just don't ever think that somebody's just going to hand something to you. I mean, the mids and the larges, right? They got their business, right? Nobody's going to give you anything because of a socioeconomic category or because you're small. You need to have value and benefit, right? It's what you bring to the table. How are you going to help them? How can you help them grow? What are you going to put in the basket?
Yeah, I like that, how you said put more in the basket than you're planning to take out. That was a great way to, I mean, that's just how you should be in every relationship. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's your kids, your family, your business partners, the people at the restaurants that are serving you. It's just taking care of people so that you take care of those relationships. I really like that whole philosophy there. So thanks for coming on and talking about this. It's a little bit different topic than we usually talk about, but I think it's super valuable, again, regardless of whether you're thinking of starting a business or you've been in it for a little while and you're like, how do I get this going in the right direction? This is just one more opportunity for them to, hear this and say, well, you know what, I'm going to try this strategy. And my final comment to folks is understand that when we talk about something like this, it sounds simple. And Tom mentioned it wasn't the first person that gave him that contract. It was several in. With you, it may take 10 with you. It may take 75. It's not about how many it takes. It's about keeping going until someone says yes. That's what it's really about. If you want to start a business and you want this thing to grow and eventually be the thing that takes care of yourself and your family, it's not about how many is it going to take. It's about going until someone says yes, and then going again until someone says yes again, and then just repeating that. And I've had times where the first 2 or 3 people I talk to say yes, and you're like, wow, this is going to be super easy. And then you go 100 no's. And then you go 2 or 3 no's and a yes, and then 2 or 3 and a yes. Like, you just never know where the next yes is going to come from. That's why you've got to keep going. And that's the hardest part of this whole deal, is keeping going And so I like how you talked about that persistence and everything there. So thanks for all the advice today. I'm sure we'll talk again about another topic, but thank you again. I really appreciate it, Tom.
Awesome. Thank you.